What if Meghan Markle's entire royal fairy tale was built on a lie, and now her own ex-husband has the receipts to prove it? In a bombshell move, Trevor Engelson has leaked private voice memos of Meghan mocking the royals and calling Prince Harry, "just my access code to the crown." The recordings have sent shockwaves across the globe, trending within minutes and leaving even her most loyal fans speechless. What exactly did Meghan say behind closed doors? Why did Trevor release these tapes now after years of silence? And how is Buckingham Palace reacting to this explosive betrayal? Stay with us as we unpack every shocking detail, the palace's secret crisis meetings, and the real story behind the woman who shook the monarchy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It started with a voice. A voice Meghan Markle likely never imagined the world would hear. A voice not laced with the polished elegance we've come to associate with her brand, but something sharper, colder, unmistakably calculated. In less than 30 seconds, she uttered the sentence that would ignite a firestorm across 2 continents. "Harry's just my access code to the crown." And just like that, the carefully built fairy tale, the one that had captivated millions, won Netflix contracts, and spawned endless hashtags, began to fall apart in real time. What followed wasn't just a PR disaster. It was an unraveling. The tapes, leaked by none other than Meghan's ex-husband, Trevor Engelson, hit the internet like a wrecking ball. Audio files that had been privately stored for years, until now. And within minutes, the story rocketed to the top of social media trends worldwide. News anchors scrambled. Royal watchers were stunned. Even longtime supporters of Meghan found themselves unsure of what to believe anymore. This wasn't tabloid hearsay. This wasn't a leaked diary or a paparazzi snapshot taken out of context. This was Meghan, raw, unfiltered, unguarded, speaking in her own words, laughing, scheming, revealing just how deep her ambitions ran and how far she was willing to go to achieve them. But why now? Why would Trevor, a man who had remained silent for so many years, choose this moment to release the recordings? Why would he risk the wrath of Meghan's powerful legal and media teams? And what else is in the vault that hasn't been released yet? This video is going to take you through everything. The recordings themselves, the fallout, the reactions from inside the palace, and the bigger picture that these revelations paint. Because this isn't just about a few sentences caught on tape. This is about the true story behind one of the most dramatic royal sagas of the modern age. A story that has been carefully curated, managed, and manipulated for global consumption until now. Let's rewind. In the beginning, there was Trevor Engelson, a Hollywood producer and Meghan's first husband. They met during the early stages of her acting career, long before she stepped onto the world stage. By all accounts, theirs was a real relationship built on long-term companionship. He supported her through auditions, encouraged her when roles were scarce, and stood by her as she slowly rose through the ranks of American television. Then came Suits, and everything changed. Their relationship began to fracture, not over one explosive event, but through a pattern. A slow, creeping divide marked by subtle distancing, growing vanity, and what many described as an obsession with status. Trevor reportedly became confused and heartbroken as Meghan transitioned from ambitious actress to image-obsessed celebrity. Friends noticed it too, the way she slowly began cutting off people who had been close to her, how she rebranded herself, how the warmth faded into calculation. Then one day, Trevor received his wedding ring back, mailed to him in a padded envelope with no note. No explanation, just silence. The abruptness of that act haunted him for years, and he never spoke about it. Not publicly, not even in the tabloids. Trevor, unlike so many others, chose dignity. Or perhaps he feared what might come if he opened his mouth. But silence doesn't last forever. A source close to Trevor says what finally pushed him over the edge wasn't the wedding, wasn't the Oprah interview, and wasn't even the Netflix special. It was the continued public narrative that painted Meghan as the victim, the saint who had escaped the monarchy and had been oppressed by everyone she had ever loved, including him. Trevor, who had remained in the shadows for nearly a decade, realized he had been recast in her story, not just erased, but villainized by implication. And then came the recordings. These weren't secretly obtained phone calls or hacked files. They were private voice memos Meghan had allegedly recorded herself during the early days of her relationship with Harry, sent to a friend who, for legal reasons, remains unnamed. In those memos, she outlines her strategy, not her feelings, toward dating Harry. She speaks of him not as a partner or love interest, but as an asset, a tool, a gateway. Harry is obsessed with me. That's his weakness, she says in one. But that's my strength. In another, she reportedly laughs while saying, once I'm in, they'll never get rid of me. That family is stuck with me. He's my access code to the crown. The tone is almost theatrical, not the voice of a woman in love, but one in control. Commanding. Calculated. The backlash was instant and merciless. Within hours of the leak, hashtags like hashtag access code Meghan, hashtag Trevor speaks, and hashtag RoyalCon spiraled to the top of social media platforms. YouTube was flooded with reaction videos, with former Meghan supporters expressing disbelief, shock, and in many cases, betrayal. Even her defenders struggled to explain away the tapes. On X, one user wrote, "I believed in Meghan. I defended her every step of the way. But if these tapes are real, then I feel used." Another, "I always thought the fairy tale was a little too perfect. Now I understand why it unraveled so fast." But the real gut punch came from within the royal circles themselves. Reports began emerging from sources close to Buckingham Palace, suggesting that senior royals were briefed on the recordings as soon as they began going viral. One palace aide described the mood as nuclear. Prince William, known for his caution and restraint, was reportedly furious. King Charles was said to have demanded a full intelligence assessment on the implications. Not just on the family's public image, but on national institutions that had been drawn into Meghan and Harry's narrative. And what about Harry? As of this recording, he has made no public statement. Not even a denial. Not even a tweet. Silence. Some say he's in shock. Others believe he might still be processing the full extent of the betrayal. A few royal insiders suggest that Harry may have never heard those tapes before they went public, that even he was blindsided by the release. Imagine that. Imagine marrying someone, giving up your royal status, moving across the world, having children, and then hearing, in her own words, that you were always just the access code. It's not just a scandal. It's a tragedy. But is it all true? Are the recordings real? Were they edited? Could they be part of a smear campaign? Experts have already begun analyzing the audio files. Forensic linguists, voice authentication specialists, and metadata analysts have weighed in. Preliminary reports suggest that the recordings have not been altered in any detectable way. The voice is unmistakably Meghan's. The timeline matches known events. The files contain GPS metadata that places her exactly where she would have been during the alleged recordings, her Toronto apartment, late 2016, just as the relationship with Harry began heating up. So the evidence is damning. But the bigger question is, what happens now? This video will take you through all the chapters of this explosive story. From the secret history between Meghan and Trevor, to the unraveling of the royal marriage, to the inner workings of a global media campaign designed to manipulate billions. We'll hear from insiders, dissect timelines, follow the money, and examine the psychological warfare that might have been at play both within Meghan herself and the world that fueled her rise. You'll hear first-hand accounts from those who were pushed out of Meghan's inner circle, dive into the unseen footage of her time with Trevor, and examine why the palace never issued a rebuttal until now. And just when you think it's over, we'll reveal the bombshell twist that Trevor has been holding back. Because this is not just a story about royalty. This is about power, image, access, and the price of ambition. By the end, you'll be asking yourself, who is the real Meghan Markle? And how much of what we've been told was ever really true? The morning the recordings hit the internet began like any other in the endless cycle of royal headlines. Social media users were casually scrolling, influencers were sharing their morning routines, and the latest tabloid speculation about Meghan and Harry barely moved the needle anymore. But then, out of nowhere, a file dropped, anonymously uploaded to a mid-tier gossip forum notorious for fringe leaks. The file name? accesscode.mp3. At first, it was dismissed as a hoax, a cruel parody, internet fodder. But the moment users clicked play, the reality settled in. The voice was real. The tone, unmistakable. This wasn't an actress doing an impression. This was Meghan Markle herself, captured in a private voice memo, with a tone far removed from the polished persona millions had grown familiar with. No publicist, no script, no filter. The audio crackled at the beginning, the sound of a phone being adjusted, followed by her unmistakable voice. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she says with a light chuckle. "Harry is obsessed with me. That's his weakness, and that's my strength. Then, after a short pause that seems almost performative, she says the words that would soon echo across every media outlet from London to Los Angeles. He's my access code to the crown. Once I'm in, they'll never get rid of me. There was silence on the forum for nearly a full hour. No comments, no reposts, just stunned disbelief. Then it spread like wildfire. Screenshots, re-uploads, Reddit threads, TikTok breakdowns. By noon in the UK, it was the #1 trending topic globally. Access code Meghan trended with over 400,000 tweets in just 5 hours. Major outlets like the Daily Mail, The Sun, TMZ, and even more serious platforms like BBC and CNN began requesting authentication. Was this real? Could it be proven? And who was behind the leak? Soon after, the anonymous uploader returned, this time with a written statement simply reading, "Trevor said the world deserves the truth." It didn't take long for the dots to connect. Within an hour, insiders confirmed that the voice memos were part of a batch Trevor Engelson had handed over to a legal intermediary. Whether for his own protection or to insulate himself from direct legal blowback, the strategy worked. The documents, according to those familiar with the release, had been sitting in storage since 2016. Stored on an encrypted USB drive in a private safe, allegedly recorded from voice memos Meghan herself sent to a friend during the early stages of her courtship with Prince Harry. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was evidence, and it sent shockwaves through the very foundation of the narrative Meghan and Harry had so carefully curated since their departure from the royal family. In one of the longer recordings, Meghan discusses her strategic approach to gaining influence in Britain. Her words are confident, almost smug. "They think I'm this doe-eyed outsider. But I've played bigger games than this. People forget. Hollywood is brutal. You either learn to own the room or you get owned." She goes on to reference Suits, how the show gave her just enough credibility to blend into the upper echelons of society, but not enough fame to be unapproachable. You don't walk into the palace as a Kardashian. That would raise alarms. You walk in with just enough sparkle, just enough intellect, just enough mystery, and suddenly, they're welcoming you. Another memo included what many interpreted as a direct shot at the Queen. She's sharp, no doubt. But old power doesn't know how to deal with new media. I do. And when the time comes, we'll control the narrative, not them. This statement in particular hit like a bomb in royal circles. Commentators on both sides of the Atlantic weighed in. Some called it the most calculated media manipulation ever caught on tape. Others argued it was simply a woman expressing ambition, no different than what men have done for centuries. But the real question wasn't whether Meghan had ambition. It was whether she weaponized a royal bloodline to fulfill it. For many longtime supporters, the audio was devastating. Influencers who had spent years defending Meghan suddenly began issuing apologies to their followers. One prominent YouTuber who had gained over 1 million subscribers creating pro-Meghan content posted a tearful response video. "I've spent 3 years telling people she was the victim, that she was targeted because she was American, biracial, independent. But this isn't racism. This isn't misogyny. This is manipulation, and it's her own words, her own voice." The backlash wasn't limited to the digital world. Television hosts dedicated entire segments to dissecting the implications. Morning shows replayed the clip on loop. Debate panels erupted. And most notably, for the first time in over a year, Meghan's team went dark. No tweets. No official denial. No legal threats. Only silence. The press began to dig. Who else had these recordings? Was there more? And how many people around Meghan had known the truth, but stayed silent? Sources close to Trevor claim that the decision to release the memos wasn't made lightly. That he had held onto them not as a weapon, but as a safeguard. For years, he reportedly believed that Meghan would leave him behind as a footnote, that her media machine would erase him, rewrite the narrative. And for a while, she did. Trevor's name all but disappeared from her biography. Few knew she'd even been married before. And those who did were discouraged from asking questions. The press, captivated by the royal wedding, glossed over the inconvenient details of her past. It was as though Trevor never existed. Until now. Now, he wasn't just part of the story. He was the detonator. By the second day, the recordings had been authenticated by 2 independent digital forensic labs. One based in New York, the other in Frankfurt. Both concluded that the audio files had not been edited, digitally manipulated, or fabricated. The metadata confirmed the timeline. The files were indeed created between October and December 2016. precisely when Meghan and Harry's secret relationship was first blooming. It wasn't just the content that shocked people. It was the method. Meghan's voice was casual, unbothered. There were no signs of hesitation or guilt. She spoke about Harry not as a person, but as a strategy. Once I'm in, I'll control the frame. Everyone loves a rebel princess. They'll eat it up. The phrase, control the frame, echoed across media headlines for days. Psychologists and behavioral analysts weighed in. Some called it evidence of narcissistic behavior. Others described it as classic emotional distancing, reducing a romantic partner to a chess piece. And yet, even with all this evidence, a portion of the public still wasn't ready to accept the truth. Some claimed the recordings were fake news, part of a targeted smear campaign. Others suggested that Trevor was motivated by revenge or bitterness. But even critics struggled to explain the specifics. The vocal patterns, the background noise, the locations mentioned that aligned with known events. As the days wore on, more files emerged. Not all of them were as inflammatory, but each added another piece to the puzzle. In one, Meghan references the media as my real kingdom. In another, she discusses what she describes as Harry's need for rescue, saying, he's a soldier without a war. I'll give him one. It was in this memo that many analysts saw the first glimpse of what might have truly been going on, a psychological entanglement built not on love, but on role-playing. Meghan, the savior. Harry, the broken prince. A modern myth told through Instagram filters and headline management. The recordings also revealed her disdain for certain palace protocols. At one point, she jokes, I swear, if one more person curtsies at me, I'm going to vomit. I'm not in a play. This isn't Buckingham Abbey. But perhaps the most disturbing recording wasn't about the royals at all. It was about Trevor. I had to cut Trevor. He's dead weight. He doesn't belong in the story I'm telling. I need clean lines, no clutter. He'll understand. Or he won't. Doesn't matter. Those words, delivered with a kind of emotional detachment that felt surgical, offered a window into the mindset behind the exit strategy. It wasn't personal. It was professional, calculated, efficient. And yet, Trevor didn't lash out. He didn't release private photos or love letters or scandalous accusations. He released her own voice. He let her tell the story, uncensored, unedited, unprotected by PR teams or carefully staged interviews. And that decision to let her words speak for themselves might be the most powerful rebuke of all. Before Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex, before the world's eyes followed her every move, and before royal courtiers fretted over her every word, she was a rising actress trying to make it in a notoriously unforgiving industry. At her side was a man named Trevor Engelson, a successful Hollywood producer with credits under his belt, a promising career ahead of him, and a heart fully invested in a woman he believed was his partner, his equal, and his forever. But that's not the story that played out. The story that unfolded privately, painfully, and away from flashing cameras was one of quiet devastation, emotional abandonment, and a transformation that few outside their inner circle ever saw coming. Trevor and Meghan met in the early 2000s. He was already established in the entertainment world, respected for his work and known for supporting new talent. Meghan, then still auditioning for minor roles and struggling to break into a cutthroat Hollywood system, found in Trevor not just a romantic partner, but a professional ally. He was the kind of man who believed in her, invested in her, and introduced her to people who could help her get ahead. Their relationship blossomed slowly at first. Friends described it as genuine, easy, grounded. They shared jokes, dreams, and a mutual understanding of the entertainment world's complexities. Meghan often leaned on Trevor for advice, for stability, and for encouragement. He believed in her potential long before anyone else in the industry truly did. They lived together, vacationed together, attended events side by side. There was a rhythm to their lives that suggested permanence. In 2011, after nearly 7 years of dating, the couple married in Jamaica. It was a low-key but beautiful beach ceremony, intimate, filled with laughter, and surrounded by close friends and family. There were no paparazzi, no palace walls, just two people, apparently in love, promising each other a lifetime. Suits, the USA Network legal drama that would become Meghan's breakout role, had just launched her into the public eye. Suddenly, Meghan was on billboards, getting interview requests, and walking red carpets not as a guest, but as a star. It was everything she had worked for. But it also marked the beginning of a slow, but undeniable transformation. Trevor, who had once been the anchor in her storm, found himself becoming an afterthought. Friends noted that Meghan's calls to Trevor became less frequent when she was filming in Toronto. There was a growing emotional distance, not created by geography, but by shifting priorities. Meghan, who once clung to Trevor's support, was now immersed in a new world, one where she was the rising figure and he, the grounded producer back in Los Angeles, no longer quite fit into the picture she was crafting. According to one close friend of Trevor's, the change was shocking. It wasn't just that Meghan became busy, the friend shared. It was like she flipped a switch. She started talking about the future like Trevor wasn't in it anymore. She became cold, strategic. The cracks in the marriage widened quickly. There were arguments over time, communication, and increasingly, over Meghan's self-promotion. Trevor, who had always supported her career, began to feel like an accessory, someone who had served his purpose in her rise, but was now in the way. He confided in a few friends, expressing confusion and heartbreak. He didn't understand what had gone wrong. Then, in what many still describe as the coldest break possible, Trevor received a package in the mail. Inside was his wedding ring. No note. No explanation. No phone call. Just the ring silently announcing the end of their marriage. Trevor, blindsided and humiliated, was reportedly devastated, not just by the end of the relationship, but by the impersonal, calculated way it was severed. There was no final conversation. No closure. Just silence. The abruptness of the split led many to speculate. Some believed Meghan had already emotionally detached long before the divorce. Others suggested that she had simply outgrown the marriage, or at least, the version of herself that had existed within it. But those closest to Trevor saw it differently. To them, it wasn't just growth. It was abandonment, delivered without compassion. Publicly, Trevor said nothing. Not a word to the press. Not a whisper to gossip outlets. He vanished from the narrative, erased almost entirely from Meghan's public story. She rarely, if ever, mentioned him. In interviews, her life, before Suits, was portrayed as a vague period of hard work and struggle, with little acknowledgement of the man who stood by her side for over a decade. When she became engaged to Prince Harry, Trevor was bombarded with calls from reporters. Offers for interviews, exposés, tell-alls, some reportedly promising six-figure sums. But he declined them all. Sources say he told friends, "I'm not going to be that guy. Let her have her story." For years, he maintained that silence. Even as Meghan reshaped her public identity, even as he watched their shared past disappear behind royal gates, Trevor stayed quiet, dignified. Some say he did it to protect himself. Others believe he still had love for the woman he once married, or at least, for the version of her he once knew. But the silence had a cost. In the years that followed, Trevor's name became a footnote, if it was mentioned at all. He was the ex-husband in whispered tabloid columns, always out of frame. And while Meghan's star rose, Trevor found himself forced to watch from a distance as a new narrative unfolded, one in which he didn't exist. It was this gradual erasure that those close to him believe planted the seeds of what would eventually become the leak. Not anger, not revenge, but a desire to reclaim the truth, to remind the world that he had existed. And that he, too, had been a chapter in Meghan's story, even if she had chosen to delete him from the script. As Meghan and Harry's public image grew more controversial, Trevor reportedly grew more uneasy. Sources say he watched the Oprah interview in stunned disbelief. When Meghan implied that she had never truly been accepted, never had agency, never felt in control, Trevor allegedly muttered to a friend, "That's not the Meghan I knew. She always had control. She always had the upper hand." Still, he said nothing. Even when Meghan's half-sister Samantha published a scathing memoir, and when Meghan's own father began giving interviews about her past, Trevor kept his mouth shut. He refused to be lumped into the chaos. He kept his life private. He rebuilt. He moved on. Then came the voice memos. Whether Trevor had always planned to release them is unclear. Some say he held on to them for legal protection. Others believe he hoped he would never need to use them. But when the media circus around Meghan reached fever pitch, and her narrative began to once again dominate global headlines, particularly as a feminist role model, a victim of royal oppression, and a misunderstood outsider, Trevor reportedly made a quiet decision. It was time for the truth. Not his truth. Not a scandalous exposé, but hers in her own words. He didn't release photos. He didn't sell intimate stories. He didn't publish a book. He leaked audio. Raw. Unedited. Verifiable. He let her speak. Those who know him say the move was deeply personal. It wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. Trevor had watched a version of events play out that didn't resemble the reality he lived through. And after years of being silent, of watching his own history be rewritten, he finally pushed back. In doing so, he cracked open the carefully managed facade of Meghan's public persona. He reminded the world that behind every curated image, there is another story. One not written by PR firms or sold to media platforms, but lived by real people. And for Trevor, that story was one of love that turned to loss, of partnership that turned to power imbalance, of being used and discarded, not by accident, but by design. In the end, Trevor Engelson didn't need to scream or beg for attention. He didn't need to fight Meghan on her battlefield. He simply let her voice speak, and in doing so, he finally found his own. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's relationship first came to light in late 2016, the headlines exploded with curiosity and romantic speculation. The charming, rebellious royal and the independent, glamorous American actress, it was a narrative that practically wrote itself. For a public grown weary of traditional royal matchups, the story felt refreshing, hopeful, even revolutionary. Meghan was modern, outspoken, passionate about humanitarian work, and Harry seemed smitten beyond measure. But beneath the romance, beneath the glossy magazine covers and gushing television interviews, there was something else brewing, a dynamic few saw coming, and even fewer dared to question. Now, with the leaked voice memos, the entire relationship has been cast under a new light, one that reframes Harry not as the bold prince who broke royal tradition for love, but as a pawn, a target, an access code. To understand how this could happen, one must look at the very foundation of Harry's life. Born into privilege but scarred by tragedy, Harry was, from an early age, shaped by trauma. The death of his mother, Princess Diana, haunted him through adolescence and into adulthood. The relentless tabloid scrutiny, the constant comparisons to his brother, the emotional suppression demanded by the royal institution, it all left deep marks. Harry himself has spoken publicly about his battles with mental health, anger, anxiety, and feelings of being adrift. It was into that context, that emotional vacuum, that Meghan stepped. By the time they met, Harry was a man searching for purpose. He had served in the military, but struggled with his royal role. He was adored by the public, yet never truly understood by the institution. He wanted to matter, to make a difference, to be more than just despair. Meghan, with her charm, intelligence, and Hollywood polish, offered him something no one else had, the promise of escape. A new narrative, a new life. In the leaked memos, Meghan appears to understand this deeply. He's broken, she says in one. But that's what makes him useful. He wants someone to save him, and I know how to play that role. It's a chilling revelation. Not because it confirms that Harry was vulnerable, but because it suggests that his vulnerability was strategically exploited. The courtship, which unfolded privately for several months before going public, was reportedly fast-paced and intense. Friends said Harry fell hard and fast. He introduced Meghan to his inner circle quickly. They took vacations together. He flew to Toronto constantly. And in what some now view as an ominous turning point, he issued an unprecedented statement condemning the press for its treatment of Meghan, a move many insiders claim he did without consulting senior royals. That statement, released in November 2016, marked the moment Harry drew a line in the sand between his family and his girlfriend. From that point on, everything shifted. The media narrative transformed from mere fascination to obsession. Royal aides were blindsided. Meghan was catapulted into an international spotlight far larger than anything Suits had ever offered her. But what few realized at the time was just how quickly Harry was isolating himself from the institution and from the people who had supported him for years. In another leaked memo, Meghan says, "His brother doesn't trust me, but that's good. The less they trust, the tighter he clings to me." That memo, more than any other, has rocked the foundations of the Windsor family. Because it suggests that what was once portrayed as a rift caused by racism or rigidity was actually seeded, in part, by manipulation. Prince William, who had always been protective of his younger brother, reportedly expressed early concerns about Meghan's intentions. Those concerns, it seems, were not misplaced. Harry, according to palace insiders, became increasingly defensive. He bristled at any criticism of Meghan. He began skipping traditional events. He pulled back from family obligations. And all the while, Meghan was reportedly consolidating influence, not just over Harry, but over their joint narrative. He wants to be good, she says in one recording. He just doesn't know how to be strong. I'll be strong for him. It's a sentiment that sounds noble, even romantic, until it's paired with her other comments. Once he's out, I'm free, she says in another. Free to speak. Free to build. Free to become what I was always meant to be. That line, what I was always meant to be, has been heavily dissected by analysts, psychologists, and media critics. What did she mean? A global icon? A political figure? A brand? Whatever the answer, it's clear that in her mind, Harry was not just a partner, but a stepping stone. Publicly, Meghan and Harry projected unity. Their engagement interview was filled with affectionate glances, inside jokes, and mutual admiration. They told the story of a whirlwind romance grounded in shared values and mutual respect. But according to staff who worked closely with them during that period, behind the scenes, things were far more complex. One palace aide, speaking anonymously, described Meghan as impossibly charming in public and impossible to manage in private. She reportedly clashed with senior staff, insisted on protocol changes, and frequently bypassed traditional channels. Harry, once known for his easygoing nature, began to mirror her rigidity. Meetings turned tense. Emails went unanswered. Resignations began piling up. Staff began referring to the couple's household as the fortress. Nothing went in or out without Meghan's approval. Every photograph, every speech, every press release was curated. And at the center of it all was Harry, increasingly withdrawn, increasingly mistrustful of his own family, increasingly tethered to a single voice. She turned him into a soldier again, one former aide said. But this time, the battlefield was his own family. The dynamic mirrored something many now recognize as a psychological pattern: trauma bonding. Harry, carrying unresolved grief and resentment, was offered what seemed like unconditional support. Meghan positioned herself not just as a partner, but as his protector. She shielded him from criticism. She validated his pain. She promised him freedom, on the condition that he leave everything else behind. In that sense, the access code metaphor takes on even deeper meaning. Harry wasn't just the access code to a palace. He was the access code to global influence. His title opened doors no actress could dream of. His name guaranteed headlines. His pain guaranteed sympathy. And Meghan, through her partnership with him, leveraged it all into a brand that spanned television, publishing, streaming platforms, and politics. Together, they became a product, a package. And for a while, the world bought in. Their wedding was watched by over 1 billion people. The royal tours drew massive crowds. Their social media accounts shattered records. Their every move sparked discussion. They were the future of the monarchy until they weren't. When they stepped back from royal duties in early 2020, the public narrative was simple. They wanted privacy, peace, and a chance to raise their family outside of the media's toxic glare. But the reality, as the memos suggest, may have been far more calculated. In a chilling audio clip from late 2019, Meghan says, "We'll pull out before they clip our wings. Go before we're pushed. We write the story, not them." Again, the clarity of purpose is striking. Meghan wasn't running from the media. She was preparing to control it. And Harry, willingly or not, was the ticket. "Harry is the story," she says in another file. "Not me. Not yet." The "not yet" sent shivers through royal circles, because it suggests that Meghan always intended to eventually become the centerpiece. That the initial strategy was to ride the wave of royal fame until she could establish her own platform, one independent of the institution, but still dripping with its prestige. Now, years later, with multi-million-dollar deals, a memoir, a podcast, and a documentary series under their belt, the strategy seems painfully obvious. But back then, it was carefully cloaked in the language of love, liberation, and social justice. And Harry? He believed it. All of it. Even now, despite the recordings, despite the public backlash, he has said nothing to contradict her. No denials. No distancing. Some believe it's because he's still loyal. Others think it's because he can't bear the truth. He's not just in love, one royal commentator noted. He's invested. Emotionally, psychologically, and financially. To walk away now would mean admitting that he gave everything up for a lie. That's the true tragedy. Because whether or not Meghan's intentions were entirely cynical, Harry's were not. He loved her. He believed in her. He built a life with her. And now, he may be the only person still holding on to the narrative that has already collapsed for everyone else. In the end, what the voice memos reveal is not just manipulation. They reveal a deeply imbalanced dynamic. one in which a wounded man searching for meaning was drawn into a relationship that offered purpose, validation, and escape. And for a time, maybe it worked. Maybe Meghan did help Harry heal. Maybe she did give him the courage to stand up for himself. But if the price of that empowerment was deception, then it's not a love story. It's a cautionary tale, one in which the access code worked perfectly until the lock changed. When the voice memos first surfaced online, the reaction from Buckingham Palace was not immediate. There were no statements, no comments from royal spokespeople, and no rebuttals from any senior member of the royal family. But behind the stone walls and polished silver of Britain's most famous institution, chaos quietly erupted. The royal family is many things: ceremonial, symbolic, diplomatic, but perhaps most importantly, it is strategic. Nothing within its ecosystem moves without careful calculation. So when the world heard Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, referring to Prince Harry as her access code to the crown, the silence from the palace wasn't indifference. It was containment. According to insiders familiar with the monarchy's media strategy, the immediate response was a closed-door emergency meeting at Clarence House, where King Charles maintains his primary operations. Senior advisors, legal counsel, press officials, and 2 representatives from the Crown Prosecution Service were said to be in attendance. The meeting lasted nearly 5 hours. The concern wasn't just public relations. It was reputational control on a scale the institution had never before encountered, not even during Diana's interview with Martin Bashir or Prince Andrew's infamous Newsnight debacle. This was a scandal born from the words of someone who had already been inside the system, who had worn the crown's symbolism and publicly defied its norms. And now, that same person was heard laughing, mocking, and manipulating it all, not in the privacy of a friend's home or a leaked email, but in her own voice. The royal family has one rule above all: never explain, never complain. It is an unspoken code of endurance, passed down through generations. The Queen lived by it. King Charles attempts to uphold it. But modern challenges, especially those driven by digital media and global scandal, have begun to test the boundaries of that rule. And this scandal, centered around Meghan's alleged use of Harry to infiltrate the royal inner circle, was threatening to upend the very narrative the palace had spent years crafting. Sources report that King Charles, who had once extended a private hand to Meghan during her early integration into the family, was visibly shaken by the tapes. Though he has grown accustomed to public scrutiny, this hit different. It wasn't about policy or protocol, it was personal. The implication that his youngest son had been manipulated into marriage, then used as a stepping stone, was not just insulting, it was catastrophic. Behind the scenes, aides were tasked with rapidly assessing the potential fallout. Could the monarchy's legal team intervene to prevent further leaks? Should the palace release a statement? What would happen if Harry broke ranks or worse, said nothing at all? Adding to the pressure was the mood inside Kensington Palace, where Prince William and Princess Catherine were said to be livid. William, always the more stoic of the 2 brothers, was reportedly angrier than he had ever been since the family's infamous Megxit fallout. For him, the tapes were not a political attack. They were an emotional betrayal. For years, William had publicly remained above the drama, choosing silence over retaliation. But privately, he had warned Harry early on about Meghan, not out of malice, but out of concern. Those warnings, as the memos now confirm, were not only dismissed but strategically used to deepen the wedge between the brothers. A close source reported, William said what many of us were thinking: she played him. And now she's played all of us. Inside the palace, discussions were reportedly divided into 2 camps. The traditionalists argued for complete silence. Let the public digest it. Let the storm pass. The modernists, however, urged for calculated action. Not a direct confrontation, but a maneuver. A signal. A shift. That shift, insiders suggest, began quietly with the palace's digital operations team. Within 72 hours of the leak, official royal websites were updated. Meghan's biography page on the royal.uk domain was minimized. Mentions of her former charities were reduced. Pages related to the Sussexes were demoted in visibility. No press release was issued, just a digital downgrade, subtle but unmistakable. Then came the reshuffling of engagements. Events previously rumored to include Harry and Meghan as possible invitees, such as the King's upcoming birthday celebration and an anniversary commemoration for the Queen, were suddenly revised. Guest lists were trimmed. Invitations delayed. Again, nothing public. But within royal circles, the message was received loud and clear: the door was closing. Meanwhile, the monarch's private secretary was reportedly asked to consult with legal teams about the titles, specifically whether there was any constitutional precedent or legal mechanism for suspending the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's royal styles. While technically Harry is a prince by birth, the dukedom and Meghan's styling as Duchess could, in theory, be modified or suspended through letters patent. Though no final decision has been made, the fact that it's even being explored marks a radical shift in tone. For years, the monarchy tolerated the couple's criticism, from the Oprah interview to the Netflix series to the memoir. But this scandal, rooted not in interpretation but in raw, authenticated recordings, has seemingly crossed a line. One source close to Charles said, "This isn't about public image anymore. This is about dignity. The monarchy can survive attacks, but it cannot survive humiliation." Palace staff weren't the only ones reacting. Members of the extended royal family, particularly Princess and Prince Edward, reportedly voiced their own frustrations. Though often in the background of royal drama, they have long been the institution's backbone, doing the work without courting attention. And they, more than most, understood the damage such recordings could do to the public's perception of the crown. Amidst the fury and chaos, one person remains silent: Prince Harry. His complete absence from the conversation has fueled even more speculation. Is he in denial? Is he negotiating behind closed doors? Or is he simply broken by what he's heard? Friends close to Harry say he is devastated, not just by the public reaction, but by the content of the tapes. One source claimed he had never heard those recordings before and was processing what it meant for his marriage, his children, and his entire public life. If true, Harry's silence may be less about loyalty and more about paralysis. Caught between the woman he loves and the family he has alienated. Whatever the case, his voice, once so powerful in defense of Meghan, is now noticeably absent. The palace, for its part, has reportedly decided to maintain its official silence for now. But sources suggest that there is growing pressure to take more definitive steps if Meghan or Harry responds publicly in defense or denial. The institution is bracing for the next move, prepared for legal battles, and quietly coordinating with Commonwealth media allies to manage the narrative overseas. In an unprecedented act, the Palace Communications Office reached out to foreign royal households, including those in the Netherlands, Sweden, and Spain, to reaffirm unity and shared values. Though framed as standard diplomatic outreach, insiders confirm it was prompted by fears that the scandal could damage not only the British monarchy but its global reputation. And at the center of this quiet storm stands a once unthinkable possibility: that the royal family may finally sever its ties, formally and symbolically, with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. That move, if it happens, won't be announced with drama. It will be measured. It will be procedural. It may involve removing HRH titles, altering public listings, or quietly issuing a statement about redefined roles and expectations. But the impact will be seismic. What was once a bold new chapter for the monarchy, the marriage of a biracial American woman into Britain's most powerful institution, may soon become a cautionary tale about control, ambition, and betrayal. And all of it, it seems, started with one voice memo and a few words that now ring through the halls of Buckingham Palace like a thunderclap: "He's my access code to the crown." For years, Meghan Markle built a reputation as a media-savvy, message-controlled figure who knew exactly how to shape a story. From her curated lifestyle blog The Tig to her red carpet appearances, her public image was sharp, modern, feminist, and inspirational. By the time she married into the British royal family, she had already built a brand, and once that brand was fused with royal prestige, it became a force of its own. But behind the carefully arranged photos, expertly chosen soundbites, and polished public statements, a different reality was quietly unfolding, one that would finally burst into view with the leaked voice memos. To fully understand the depth of this contrast, one must first examine Meghan's media machinery, a system of public relations, image crafting, and narrative control more sophisticated than what even seasoned politicians utilize. From the beginning of her relationship with Harry, Meghan maintained a tight grip on how she was portrayed. Despite entering the royal sphere, where traditional protocol dictated that members of the firm leave communications to palace professionals, Meghan reportedly insisted on maintaining her own team of media advisors. Some of these were retained from her Hollywood days, others were brought in from high-profile American firms with crisis management experience. The strategy was clear: never relinquish control. Royal insiders revealed that Meghan often clashed with Buckingham Palace's communication officers. She wanted to modernize messaging, steer press releases, and directly influence how stories were shaped about her. The palace, an institution built on stoic restraint and slow, careful communication, was unprepared for the speed and aggression of Meghan's media approach. Tension quickly grew between her team and royal staff. What the royals considered protocol, Meghan saw as red tape. This friction became most obvious during the couple's first overseas tour in Oceania. While Harry charmed the crowds and played the familiar role of royal diplomat, Meghan was seen backstage insisting on multiple rewrites of press briefings, adjusting how her statements were framed, and reportedly demanding final approval of photos before they were distributed to the press pool. Aides noted that nothing was left to chance. The wardrobe, the hand-holding, the offhand remarks about bananas or baby bumps, they were all rehearsed. It wasn't just about image control. It was about power. Meghan knew that public opinion could be her greatest weapon, or her most dangerous enemy. And in the beginning, it worked. She was celebrated, heralded as the future of the monarchy. The American princess who brought diversity, relatability, and global glamour to an aging institution. But cracks began to appear. Slowly, then all at once. The first real rift between image and reality emerged during the infamous Tiara Gate incident. Royal sources claimed Meghan clashed with royal staff over which tiara she could wear for her wedding. Reports suggested she was told no by the Queen herself. Meghan's version of events downplayed the conflict, but it was the first whisper of her inability to accept the institution's limits. More whispers followed, of crying aides, broken protocol, and private tantrums over public scheduling. Still, her media strategy held. She was able to maintain control by positioning herself as the misunderstood outsider, the strong woman pushing against a rigid, antiquated system. With each slight, real or perceived, she added to a growing narrative. Meghan the victim. Meghan the rebel. Meghan the modernizer who wouldn't be silenced. The Oprah interview became the centerpiece of that narrative. A masterclass in emotional branding. The 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey offered Meghan an unfiltered platform to reframe her story entirely. Through carefully structured answers and dramatic pauses, she revealed alleged racism within the royal family, claims of suicidal ideation, and a portrayal of herself as isolated, unprotected, and betrayed. It was a public relations triumph, at least at first. Headlines around the world exploded in sympathy. Social justice organizations rallied. Celebrities voiced their support. The Sussexes became cultural icons, hailed for their bravery and honesty. And yet, beneath the applause, fact-checkers and royal insiders were scrambling. Several claims made during the interview, including the denial of Archie's title, confusion about royal security, and the timeline of events, didn't align with documented royal policy or known history. Still, the strategy worked because of one central mechanism: control. Meghan and Harry spoke without challenge, unfiltered, uninterrupted. There was no opposing voice, no palace rebuttal, and no confrontation of inconsistencies. The Sussexes owned the frame. Until they didn't. The moment the voice memos were leaked, the entire framework collapsed. What had previously been dismissed as tabloid speculation, that Meghan was ambitious, controlling, and image-obsessed, now had confirmation, in her own words. Comments like, "Harry's just my access code," and "once I'm in, they'll never get rid of me," weren't interpretations. They were statements. And no amount of PR spin could reshape them. Within days, Meghan's carefully constructed media facade began to crumble. Her Archetypes podcast, once praised for its feminist undertones, was reevaluated by critics. What had been interpreted as empowering suddenly sounded curated, insincere, and self-serving. Episode titles like "The Misconception of Ambition" now rang hollow, especially when juxtaposed with recordings of Meghan mocking royal customs and belittling Harry behind his back. Supporters on social media began to waver. Fan accounts that once championed her quotes and speeches fell silent. Influencers who had defended her in endless TikTok videos began deleting content. Even Meghan-friendly media outlets, such as People and Elle, began using more cautious language, shifting from praise to neutrality. The shift was also evident in the comment sections. Where once there was overwhelming adoration, now there was confusion, disappointment, and outright anger. How could she lie like this? One user wrote beneath an old video clip of Meghan's UN Women's speech. "I believed in everything she said." The memo fallout exposed a truth Meghan's media strategy had always sought to avoid: real transparency. Because controlling the narrative only works until something undeniable slips through. And in this case, what slipped through wasn't a tabloid headline or a paparazzi photo. It was her own voice, candid, smug, and completely unguarded. Damage control efforts began almost immediately. Meghan's legal team reportedly issued quiet inquiries to media outlets, warning against sharing unauthorized private recordings. Her PR representatives released a vague, indirect statement about the dangers of weaponizing selective audio content. But it was too late. By then, major platforms had already archived the tapes. Analysts had broken down the metadata. Vocal recognition software confirmed authenticity. The source was known. The damage was irreversible. And while Meghan's strategy team worked overtime to regain control, reality was working even faster. Brands began reconsidering partnerships. One major cosmetics company, which had previously engaged Meghan for a global ambassadorship, quietly suspended talks. A children's book initiative in Canada paused promotional plans involving Meghan's previous title, The Bench. Media analysts began pointing out the dissonance between Meghan's public messaging and her private persona. She had long branded herself as a feminist icon. Yet she had referred to her husband as an asset. She spoke about female empowerment. Yet in the recordings, she reduced herself to a player in a royal game, mocking the very institution she once vowed to modernize. The contrast was stark, and it exposed a larger issue: the cost of curating a public identity that doesn't reflect private values. In public, Meghan was the voice of compassion. In private, she was heard dismissing palace staff, mocking tradition, and calculating her moves with stunning clarity. It forced the public to reconcile two conflicting versions of the same person, and in doing so, shattered the illusion that had once seemed unbreakable. The fallout extended beyond image. It called into question every major media appearance the Sussexes had ever done. Critics began revisiting their Netflix docuseries with fresh eyes, noting moments where scenes appeared dramatized, narrative arcs were constructed, and facts were shaped to suit a message. It even cast doubt on Harry's memoir, Spare, which painted Meghan as a savior, a beacon of emotional truth in a cold institution. Now, readers began asking, was that story ever really his? Because the memos painted a different picture. One where Harry wasn't the narrator, but the narrative. Not the hero, but the plot device. Not the rebel royal, but the access code. It is perhaps the cruelest irony of all that the woman who once accused the royal family of controlling her image has now been revealed to have meticulously controlled hers all along. Not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a strategist, one who saw opportunity, seized it, and weaponized it for global dominance.